It is a real pleasure always interacting with PIC, and it's something I always look up to and look forward to, because more than we speaking and we saying, there's a lot to learn from you, Dr. Kirkar, Dr. Mashirkar, and the whole pool of people out there. I call it sort of like going back to the books and getting your basics right, because many times what happens is, we as politicians or as young people working for the society, we tend to have perspectives, and we have this thing called Josh, and we actually want to get things done in a very speedy manner, in a very efficient manner, in a very uh, let's do it right here, right now types. And along with the Josh, people like you and institutions like all of you actually give us that Hosh also. So what is needed today is Hosh and Josh. So that is a very important blend for all of us to have. Uh, but the topic here is very, very relevant in terms of moving from promises to action. Because as I think that's extremely relevant, because in the past 2 years, in my interaction with everyone as an environment minister, I've actually been hearing a lot of jargons, a lot of difficult words and different concepts which have been complicated to sound scientific, concepts that have been made to sound very, very complex and important, but they're actually concepts which are something which are so simple. If you break it down, it happens in your everyday life. And I think because it becomes very complex, or the terminology is so different, that we sort of take it remotely away from the people. Now, what is really important to start off with, and I'm actually coincidentally on my way from one program to another, that's why I'm addressing it from a car. But the good part is, I had come to Nagar, where I was inaugurating an ethanol plant for a sugar factory, for a distillery. And while interacting with them, I think Praj Industries has put it up for the Mura sugar plant out here. What I learned is basically they have zero liquid discharge because of the incinerator boiler and the ethanol production that they are now entering into. And they're also looking at biofuels. Now, this is where I think we're moving away from, rather moving forward from policy to implementation on ground. Because wherever we were in the last 2 years, of course, due to COVID, there's a lot of VCs happening, a lot of interactions happening globally over video conferences. What is really important is, how do you go beyond the video conferences? How do you go beyond the policy papers and studies and researches? Because everyone's doing that. How we as politicians or governments or as elected representatives can actually start implementing what we have learned about climate change and these VCs on ground. Is it really important to only speak about them, or can we actually bring them into action in this year itself? Many times when we are looking at the policy papers, when we're looking at our promises, all the promises really are about 2070, 2050, 2040. And the best part for us as governments is we sign all these MOUs for 2050, 2040, which is still 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And we feel great about it, because we're like, yes, 2050, we're going to hit carbon neutral. 2070, we're going to hit carbon neutral. In politics, a lot of politicians said yesterday, we tend to take away the political promises as, हाँ ठीक है, कल चुनाव में बात हुई थी, जुमला था, अभी छोड़ दिया मैंने. But that is not something we can really afford to do with climate change, because climate change is no longer something which is as distant as our promises or as further away as our goal. We do not have the luxury of time to implement our climate promises or climate action. Now, climate action can come in three ways. Of course, mitigation is something we cannot give up on. Even though I firm believe that climate action is something we need to go ahead with, climate change is, we have meeting every Wednesday. Every time we have a session of our legislative assembly, I have MPs coming from across Maharashtra, and who come to the chief minister's office, the deputy chief minister's office, cabinet, saying, okay, we need compensation for this farm field, we need compensation for that city, we need this compensation for this village. When you ask why, it is because you've had hailstorm or unseasonal rainfall, extended mini cloud burst, drought, or a drought-like situation. And so this has been happening for the past 10, 15 years more aggressively and more often than ever before. Now, as my own experience says, in the past 10 years of being in politics, I remember in the year 2010, 2011, 2012, right up to almost 2015, there were areas in Maharashtra which were like, say, Marathwada, Uttar Maharashtra, Vidarbh, even Jawar Mukhada, as close to Mumbai as can be, where we were facing a terrible drought situation. Now, from 2017, 2018 onwards, These are the same places where we used to visit to give water in the wells through tankers or photo camps. Today we're going there to provide relief for flash floods. And this is something which is mind-boggling because the geography hasn't changed, the people haven't changed, people's activities haven't changed, but the weather has changed. And the demands for compensation have moved from one head of compensation to another, but the demand is the same. Now, the point is, whenever we speak about compensation and whenever these demands come up in the legislative assembly or the council, I try to make a point saying, okay, this is, we have to give compensation. We have to provide basic security to people in terms of financial stability, economic safety, food safety. But we also need to realize as a political class and as society at large of why we are facing this need for compensation. What are these disasters that are coming our way? Are these anomalies anymore? No. Are these erratic weather patterns anymore? No. These are frequent weather patterns which are happening at a larger level, more harsher than ever before, and regularly in our own fields, in our own backyards, in our own lanes. This is no longer a thing for the Himalayan retreating glaciers, the Alps, or Antarctic or Arctic. It is about our own country, our own state, our own district, our own city, our own village, our own 10 yards around us. Now, when we speak about this, one of the biggest things I need to say in terms of what we need today is going beyond policies. We need to politicize climate change. And I say this very, very carefully. I say this with a great sense of responsibility because I see this that wherever there is, especially in our country, wherever there is films or cricket or politics, there's a lot of talk about it. There's a lot of action on ground about it. You have people creating all these reels and TikToks on social media when you speak about films. You have gully cricket happening and you have films being followed, cricket being followed very closely when it's about cricket. When it is politics, especially after 2014, every discussion on our dining table is about politics in every Indian household. Now, when we start politicizing an issue like climate change, when you have political parties fighting for credit, fighting for, okay, this is climate change action that we have initiated, I think at that point in time in Indian history or Indian future rather, we would have successful action on ground going beyond just policies. Today, I've seen that there is a new hydrogen policy that has been approved by the government of India. We have a solar alliance that we are a part of. We have a renewable energy that we are, a policy that we have. We've got an EV policy. Now, obviously, in terms of policies, in terms of areas like Swachh Bharat, Maji Vasundhara, solid waste management, grey water treatment, STPs, more or less, everything has started implementation. Everything is in a ball that is rolling. But if we actually want implementation on ground, we need to have participation of the public in a formal and informal manner. Corporates coming up, looking at converting their fleets to EVs, looking at efficiency in terms of their energy use, transport audits, more plantations in the manufacturing industries. If it's a service industry, audit your transport, your carbon footprint for energy, services, everything. In an informal manner, of course, the young and old, everyone, because I remember it's not just the job of the young people, it's not just the onus of the young people, or it's not just also the good work of the young people. You also have a generation in their late 60s, 70s, 80s that remembers the olden days where you did not have ready to use or on pack and go containers for food. You did not have multi-layered plastic as containers for wafers. You did not have masalas being packed in plastic bags that are now thrown away. In fact, one of my conversations with Dr. Mashirkar actually was very enlightening because I was speaking to him about plastics and he was telling me about how plastic is actually a wonderful product if used responsibly. It is us as the human race that has converted plastic or as something as beautiful as plastic, which is more durable. You don't have to cut trees for wood or any other material. It can be used more often, recycled more often, upcycled more often, to something which has become use and throw, and more often than not found in our seas, in our cows, and our fish, than in our homes for better use. Now, if we can go back to how our own grandmothers used to use milk bags, slit it on the top, use the milk bag, give it back to the milkman. I think these are some of the ways that we can actually go and do this. But again, not taking much more time, I think what we really need to do, and we've begun this in Maharashtra, I've started having interactions with all the MLAs and all the MPs, getting them to acclimatize with what climate change is, getting them to be oriented with what climate change is. Because when you have a minister, when you have an MP, when you have an MLA talking about climate change to a farmer, talking about drip irrigation, saving water, better cropping patterns, getting used to climate change in terms of cropping patterns, better use of fertilizers. Or if you come to the city, talking about how we can better our footpaths, our traffic management systems, more urban forests, more rainwater percolation systems. I think it is only then and then can we actually speak about climate change with the ownership that yes, India is moving towards climate action. So my firm belief, to reiterate, is we need to politicize climate change, and that is where action on ground will begin beyond policies. Thank you.